Hello and welcome to another Atypical Philosopher video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. Hello, welcome to any newbies to the channel. This is my Ukraine War Update Extra. This is where I just go through a bunch of nuggets, interesting talking points, or at least they're interesting to me, and I hope they're interesting to you. Interesting talking points about the Ukraine War, and discuss ideas about those points, and just generally have a stream of consciousness chat. And you can disagree or agree with anything I say. Please put your comments in the thread below. What's our first one? Well, the first one is not sure, and this is the tweet of Tim White. Not sure if we can believe this or if it's an attempt to undermine Putin, but the Washington Post reports a member of the Russian leader's inner circle has directly disagreed with Bunker Boy. They say it indicates growing discontent with Putin. Now, this is very interesting and is super, super important. You are starting to see fracture lines within the Kremlin. And if people like the Washington Post are reporting on this, yeah, you could argue this is made up propaganda to try and undermine the authority and the unity of the Kremlin. But I'm pretty sure this is happening. We have seen in the last couple of days the arrest of Wagner mercenary group members and by the internal security forces in Russia, and that shows that there is definitely something going on. Now, there was a theory that Prigozhin, this chap that's in charge of the Wagner mercenary group, was positioning himself to become the new defense minister. He's actually done half decent job with his troops have done a half decent job compared to the rest of the Russian army in actually taking some ground near Bakhmut and other areas. And he was famous for going around the Russian prisons and recruiting prisoners. Anyway, to have a few of the Wagner group arrested quite publicly in Moscow says something funky is going on. But then, if he's going to take over the defense minister job, what about the defense minister? Well, that's Sergei Shoigu. Today, they are all over the news, himself and Gerasimov. So Shoigu and Gerasimov were probably removed from the post of the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation and the head of the General Staff. And this is all over Twitter and all over social media. Lots of reports about this. So this is Sergei Shoigu and Gerasimov were likely to be removed from their positions. And that is that. There's a saying that says, you don't change horses crossing a river. Okay, so when you're in the middle of crazy stuff, you don't go changing things around. So changing your hugely important staff members in the middle of a war or in the middle of particularly important parts of any given conflict is reflective that things are that bad that you need to change in this really inopportune time to change. So there's another guy that's been put in charge of the forces in Ukraine at the moment, who's again just someone else from another part of the forces that shows that things aren't going well from at least Putin's point of view. That he needs to shuffle his pack. Well, shuffling the pack right now is arguably counterproductive, even if the guys that you have got are doing a pretty bad job. So that's really fascinating. Now, Russia itself is changing its views, or the people of Russia, on this entire campaign and this entire war. So you've now had polling coming out to say that it turns out the people who are most supportive of the war are the elites, the richer people, and the people who are least supportive of the war are the poorer demographics in society, right down to the very, very poorest are the least supportive. Who is it that gets sent off to war? Generally the poorest and the people who can't afford to escape, or to in terms of mobilization and conscription, or bribe, or be elite enough to be in positions where they can get around having to do it, or being at university and therefore invalidated from normal conscription in normal times. So that's an interesting dynamic, that not only is the war becoming less popular across the entire sort of population of Russia, but there is a demographic difference in who finds it less popular than someone else, and those it's just fascinating. The people who are on the receiving end of going to war are obviously going to be the people who like it least, and the elites who make the decisions that send these people to their deaths are those who are more supportive of it. But ever that has been with war, I guess. I've brought up Elon Musk a couple of times recently, and in fact, if you love Elon Musk, right, he has his defenders, and they're almost like a cult. If you're a, I don't know, MAGA supporting Republican in America who loves Elon Musk, then my opinions are going to annoy you. And there have been a few that come on to attack me for attacking Elon Musk. It's like, hang on, I may dislike it. Well, I don't particularly mind. He's a clever guy in terms of his innovations and business acumen. But he's also put his foot in it really terribly in terms of Ukraine over the last few weeks. So if you don't know, he's basically advocating for peace that really benefits Russia more than it does Ukraine, and yet Russia, the people that have invaded illegally a sovereign nation and caused untold amounts of pain and suffering, and human rights abuses have been recorded in the tens of thousands. And here he is saying, well, look at all this pain and suffering, we've got to put an end to this, so let's try and appease Russia. Well, actually, Ukraine are on the up. They're looking like they could win this thing, and what about their say in the matter? He's like, well, let's look at the opinions of the Russians, and he brings out an opinion from 2012 before even parts of Ukraine were annexed, and then so he basically doubles down and doubles down. Anyway, all that aside, he was called out on Twitter for all this by the Ukrainians, by Zelensky himself. And then we had this during which we had this counteroffensive in Kherson, and then suddenly the counteroffensive has kind of stopped on an operational pause. Well, that also correlates, and this could be a bit of a conspiracy theory, so be warned. But this coincided with comms going down, communications going down for the Ukrainians, and it turns out that Starlink has stopped working. Financial Times here reports Elon Musk's Starlink devices stopped working near the front line, hampering Ukraine's effort to liberate the territory. It comes days after the world's richest man suggested giving in to Russia over Crimea. Coincidence? I mean, you've got Financial Times reporting on this issue. So yes, it could just be a bit of a conspiracy theory. It could be a coincidence, but it could also be someone who seems to have a great amount of pride and doesn't like losing, or doesn't like losing face in public. He's been called out and throws a temper tantrum. I mean, this fits in with kind of his character and what he's done temper tantrum wise in terms of Twitter. It looks like he's going to have to buy Twitter now. It's back on the table buying Twitter, because it's actually cheaper for him to buy Twitter than to lose a court case and be forced to buy Twitter at a more expensive rate, as was part of the deal with going in to buy Twitter in the first place. So, I think he might end up buying Twitter, but not particularly because he wants to. It's just cheaper for him to do so. Okay, so let's move off. Musk's moving towards these Iranian drones, of which there are plenty now. Cargo planes full of them have been recorded landing in Moscow, and they are now being used particularly in the south, in the Zaporizhzhia front line, and in the Kherson area. This is so let's take you to the map. In this area, we're seeing a lot, and in Mykolaiv, we're seeing a lot of these loitering munitions, these kamikaze drones, and Zaporizhzhia, and they are causing a lot of problem. They are cheap. They can remain in the sky for quite a long time. They can loiter until they find their targets and then hit their targets. Well, Ukraine have said that as of today, actually this was the 7th, so this is 2 days ago now, the Ukrainian army has intercepted and destroyed 60% of the 86 Iranian-made Shahed 136 loitering drones sent against them by Russia. I mean, that sounds like quite a lot of drones, and it is. I'm pretty confident there'd actually be more having been sent than that. And although 60% sounds great, that's still 40% getting through. And if you're sending a lot of drones, then that 40% is meaningful. If I buy one lottery ticket, I'm not going to win the lottery, probably statistically. But if I buy 20 million lottery tickets, I've got a pretty good chance of winning the lottery. If I send enough Iranian drones are sent by Russia against Ukraine, then enough will get through to cause a lot of problem, and they are causing problems. So yeah, it's great that 60% have gone down, but actually 100% would be even better. So here's an article from, I think, yesterday. Russia targets Zaporizhzhia with kamikaze drones for the first time. With its army losing ground to Ukraine's counteroffensive, Moscow has started to deploy drones to attack Ukrainian targets. According to Ukrainian military officials, kamikaze drones are cheaper and less sophisticated than missiles, but have proved effective at causing damage to targets on the ground. The Shahed 136 drones are able to remain airborne for several hours, as I mentioned, and circle over potential targets before being flown into enemy troops, armor, or buildings and exploding on impact. On Monday, the Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Nasser Kanani denied supplying the drones to Russia, calling the claims baseless. However, the Ukrainian military said its forces had shot down more than 20 drones over the last 24 hours and that most were Iranian made. On Wednesday, Russia allegedly deployed another 6 drones to bombard Bilatsverkva, a city about 55 miles, 90 km from Kyiv, injuring 1 person, according to the regional governor. So that's quite a long way into the center of Ukraine. Okay, next little nugget. MRAPs. What are MRAPs? Just to remind you, these are mine-resistant, ambush-protected vehicles. Basically, armored vehicles that are particularly well armored to be resistant to mines exploding under them or to the side of them. And they'll have shaped armor underneath. Sometimes you get V-shaped armor to deflect the blasts away. Sometimes you know, different constructions. Anyway, that's what an MRAP is. Now, the other day I showed you this video, and this is I love the geekery of the threads, right? And this is what I do. So I showed you this video that had this is near Kostromka in the northern Kherson front line. And here we had a bunch of different equipment on show. Okay, and then suddenly this vehicle came past. So this vehicle here, this is an MRAP. And it comes round and just drives. I mean, it's nothing particularly interesting or special. But there it is. Okay. Why am I bringing this up? So, some guy on the thread said, it's great to see, I presume an Aussie, great to see, oh mate, awesome, great to see a Bushmaster here, awesome piece of kit, type thing. And I butchered the Australian accent, but hey. And I was like, yeah, that's a good point. I probably should have mentioned that because I didn't really think. I mean, it looks a bit like a Bushmaster, but actually, it's not a Bushmaster. And someone else on the thread said, I don't think it is a Bushmaster. That is either a Turkish or a Polish vehicle. So I was like, yeah, I don't think it is a Bushmaster. It looks a bit different around the wheel arches, so on and so forth. I mean, just geeky, uninteresting stuff for some, but I'm going to go through this anyway. So there it is. I thought, okay, yeah, I think it probably is a Turkish or Polish. So I went through the Polish MRAPs. It's like not a Polish MRAP. Went through the Turkish one straight away. It's a Turkish one. So here it is. You got that 4 little windows at the back. 4 little windows at the back. You got the wheel arches are the same, so on and so forth. And there you go. So I put on a thread. Yeah, it's definitely a BMC, which is a Turkish one that's been given, and it's got exactly the same paint job. Paint jobs are often a giveaway, and it's a Turkish BMC that's been given to Ukraine. Anyway, literally about half an hour after putting that on a thread, I then come across this Defmon video posted. Well, it's not his video, but posted on his Twitter feed, which says Turkish-made MRAP captured by the Russians. It looks like it has been immobilized and evacuated by the Ukrainian forces. The explosion at the beginning is clearly unrelated failed RU propaganda. So a couple of things to note here. What you'll see quite often, and the Ukrainians do this as well, is you'll see videos that are stitched together. You'll sometimes, it's almost like stock footage of certain guns going off and then explosions. And it's like, I saw those guns going off. I've seen those guns going off in that way, that exact clip, as part of about 30 different clips. So I know that's not those guns firing and those explosions going off. So you are stitching together videos, and sometimes one part is actually not connected to another. So here we got the beginning, some kind of explosion going off, and then the implication is that this leads to this. It's like, well, none of the scenery doesn't look the same, the weather doesn't look the same, and this vehicle is not exploded or anything. So this is where I've just shown you a little bit of doing some investigative work. It's quite fun doing these little puzzles if you're sad like me. So what vehicle is this? And then you look at something like this, and the Russians are saying, look, we've taken this. But then there's absolutely no sign of, or barely any sign of damage to this vehicle. And so when you have barely any damage to a vehicle, as Defmon says here, Turkish-made MRAP captured by the Russians, it looks like it's been immobilized and evacuated by the Ukrainian forces. The explosion, so blah, 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 blah. Most likely the same as this. So what that is saying then is that MRAP, those MRAPs, those Turkish ones, are actually known for being quite unreliable mechanically, so they do break down quite easily. They were used in Syria, I think, and broke down quite easily there. So therefore, the likelihood is this, because it's got no damage on it, it was almost certainly broke down, and then this was in quite a hot area and was evacuated. They took as much stuff as they could, and there you go. So that's that. What else can I say? Speaking of abandoning vehicles, okay, there's a segue here. I do try and link things up a little bit. This came out from the British intelligence update. They do this every day, the UK, and it's really interesting. They've never really done this before with anything, but they've got on Twitter since the beginning of this campaign, and it acts not only as intelligence and information, but really this is propaganda. So this is the UK having a dig at Russia on a daily basis and just kind of like saying, oh, they're not done very well here, oh, they're a bit rubbish here. And it's like everyone is an official denting of the pride of Russia, or at least that's the intention. But there are some very interesting observations that are made. It's not often very cutting edge, like it's usually a day or so behind open source intelligence people who are finding out what's going on exactly here and there. But there are some interesting observations, and this is a very pertinent one that has been the case since almost the beginning. So at the beginning of the conflict, when loads of Russian equipment was being found, this was a time when the Russian equipment was being driven or used by mainly actual Russian soldiers. A few conscripts were here and there, but what would happen, the training is, when you abandon a vehicle, you drop some hand grenades in it. You disable the vehicle, because otherwise that vehicle is zero-sum game again. That vehicle gets taken by the opposition. Your loss is their gain, and then their gain is used against you. So if you don't blow up this tank, then they're going to capture that tank, and they could use that tank to blow you up. Therefore, take it out, and at least they don't get it. It's just a loss. So the UK intelligence said the failure of Russian crews to destroy intact equipment before withdrawing or surrendering highlights their poor state of training and low levels of battle discipline. With Russian formations under severe strain in several sectors and increasingly demoralized troops, Russia will likely continue to lose heavy weaponry. Question is, why are they doing this? Is it because of their poor training, or do they not? Do they know their training but don't care enough, but almost want to give? Do they realise that they're the bad guys? There's a very famous. I should play it on one of my videos. Mitchell and Webb, two comedians, UK comedians, and they're dressed up as SS, and they're set in the Second World War, and they've got all their SS uniform on, and one looks to the other. David Mitchell looks to the Jonathan Webb, and says, "Do you ever look in a mirror?" I'm paraphrasing. Do you ever look in the mirror, look at our uniform, and think we're the bad guys? I mean, we've got skulls on our uniform, and the design is looking back, and it's this quite funny look at the fact that there must be a point in time where people who are doing truly horrible things on behalf of their authority figures and leadership, they realize that actually what we're doing we're not the good guys. What we're doing is not morally awesome. Like, we're torturing people. We're shooting civilians in the back. We're just not the good guys. So sometimes I wonder when the Russians are. I mean, the Russian forces are a massive variety of people, right? There will be some who hate the Ukrainians and they're dyed in the wool, pro-Putin, etc., etc. Fighters, and there'll be others who don't want to be there and will run away as soon as they can, and realise that actually Ukraine have a right to do what they're doing, and Russians are are in a are doing bad stuff. So you could look at some of these abandoned vehicles and go, they've been abandoned. They know they should blow it up, but they don't want to. Or maybe they've abandoned the vehicle and surrendered themselves, or whatever. So there's going to be a whole load of reasons. But it's a long rant for me. But the simple fact of the matter is that the Russians are not destroying their vehicles after they abandon them en masse. This is happening hugely, and it is a real problem for the Russians in the long term because they are now the biggest provider of armament to Ukraine. Of all the nations who have been generously giving equipment to Ukraine and shipping it over, the Russians are giving them the most. Next nugget, okay, Zaporizhzhia, which is in this context, it's a nuclear plant that is in the Russian territory, occupied territory, even though Zaporizhzhia itself, as a city, is not. But the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant is constantly being shelled, and the idea is that so many people say the Russians are shelling it as a false flag operation to try and get the Ukrainians, looking bad. So Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant needs urgent protection as last power supply is cut. So Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant is in need of urgent protection after fresh rounds of Russian shelling destroyed its last external power source, the UN's nuclear watchdog has warned. Go away. Sorry, I have Steven Seagal on the screen for some strange reason. The International Atomic Energy Agency said that the plant's link to a 750 kilovolt line was cut at around 1 a.m. Saturday. It cited official information from Ukraine, so this could be propaganda, as well as reports from IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency. So, okay, maybe not propaganda. Experts at the site, which is held by Russian forces. Quote, the resumption of shelling hitting the plant's sole source of external power is tremendously irresponsible. The Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant must be protected, Director General Rafael Mariano Grossi said today. This is the thing that a lot of people have been worried about by point of fact that Russia appear to be using nuclear power plants as weapons, or this particular nuclear power plant as a weapon. They're weaponizing the nuclear power plant as opposed to using nuclear weapons, arguably, and they are using it as a pawn in this very dangerous game of chess. So anyway, something to watch out for. Someone asked me on a thread, what do I think about the Ukraine defense industry and what's it doing at the moment? Ukraine defense industry is incredibly important, or at least historically has been. So when Ukraine got its independence from Russia, there was still Russia, when it was a Soviet Union, had a lot of defense capability, infrastructure or manufacture taking place in Ukraine. So Ukraine kind of inherited an awful lot of factories and capability for making armaments. So it's long been a very important part of their economic mix. But what's happened is that capability has been massively degraded. Izium, which is where they made like Stugna and a bunch of other stuff, was obviously occupied, and they won't be able to do that there now, even though it's been liberated. So what's going on? Well, the simple answer is it's almost impossible to tell, because as soon as someone like me in just sitting in my house is telling you, oh, they're making X, Y, and Z in Ukraine. If I know that, the Russians know that, and the Russians know that, it will be blown up. That's going to be one of they're blowing up armament factories in Bulgaria, for goodness sake, because they know that they are providing Ukraine with old Soviet munitions. So if Russia knows where the Ukrainians are building, weapons, they will be their number one targets. There have been a lot of places that have been repairing vehicles that are damaged. And in fact, earlier on in the conflict, there was some social media videos that went out on social media of some of these places, and they accidentally gave away information that meant that the places could be visually geolocated, they could be visually recognized and geolocated, and in fact a couple of them got taken out, or at least one definitely got taken out because of that. That's also happened on the Russian side, by the way. But it's really important if pictures are taken that you if you're going to take a repaired vehicle or something that's been manufactured, that you blur around the outside, or you take a picture just inside a workshop that just can't, it's just generic enough that you can't mark it to be anywhere. But as soon as things are outside, you can start geolocating things. You have people in the open source intelligence community on both sides doing that all the time, all the time. So yeah. Anyway, so the point being that it's still working. To what capacity is difficult to know at the moment. Given the challenges Ukraine faces in procuring weapons, it has no choice but to rely partly on domestic manufacturing. So it's still taking place. Talking to Ukimform, Vladislav Belbas, chief executive officer of the Ukrainian manufacturer UAV, summarized the situation. Without waiting for lend-lease, Ukraine is obliged to place orders with domestic producers. Will there be negative consequences for the Ukrainian defense industry from lend-lease? Yes. So that means that our own industry is going to suffer because we're getting given so much stuff for free from abroad. So that means that we're not demanding stuff from our own defense manufacturers, which doesn't benefit them and therefore our own economy. Yes, there will, but the key word here is Ukrainian, because if there is no lend-lease, then there will be no Ukrainian defense industry. There needs to be a healthy balance between import supplies, capabilities, and domestic manufacturing capabilities. And the article goes on to say, given the state of Ukrainian finances, there's little hope that Kyiv will overload its local producers with orders. On the other hand, maintaining production lines capable of repairing equipment seems to be the more achievable goal. Quote, Ukraine has a significant armored vehicle rebuild facilities. So this may account for their ability to recycle damaged or captured armored vehicles, reminds Stephen Zaloga, someone that was mentioned before. This aspect is also underscored by Vladislav Belbas. Quote, the indigenous industry should not stand aside and watch this process, because without domestic manufacturers, none of the equipment supplied to us will be promptly repaired. We cannot take, for example, an American howitzer to the USA for repairs. In other words, the Ukrainian defense industry plays a really vital role in being able to fix not only their own stuff that they have the knowledge of fixing, but they need to gen up on finding out or working out or being trained on how to fix Western or NATO munitions, armaments, equipment, because they need to. They can't send this stuff back to America. I mean, they are sending stuff back to Poland and Germany to get fixed, because that's relatively close and pretty easy to do. Anyway, another article here from Defense News. Ukraine arms maker finds export interest in combat-proven missiles. This is really interesting. So, and I have mentioned this before, the Russians have got a really long history in exporting loads of their defense equipment. So they make, these Sukhoi, these Su jets, or their T-80s and T-90s, and they make all this stuff, and then they say, look how wonderful it is, and they sell it to people who are broadly, supportive of Russia as opposed to supportive of the West, and they'll sell their stuff around the world, and people will buy it because it seems to have done a good job, say in Syria or over here. Now, what's really interesting is this has been not only a bad war for Russia prima facie, which means like really obviously a bad war for them because they're losing loads of troops and equipment, and it's costing them massively, just right up front, but also the long-term effects because their equipment has shown to be absolutely shite. At least the best equipment appears not to be being used at all, or certainly not being showcased. Like the T-90 tank, where is it? Some of their best aircraft, where are they? They're afraid to fly. Okay, so this then shows their equipment in a negative light. So actually, they have dwindling sales. Not only can they not make them because of sanctions, but no one wants to buy them because actually Russia are getting their asses kicked. Okay, Ukraine, on the other hand, at international defense sort of expos, are having loads of interest. So we talked, I in my previous extra video, I talked about the Stugna, the skiff. And this article says, in Kielce in Poland, Ukraine's defense industry is observing a spike in demand from foreign customers interested in securing weapons proven in combat against Russia's invasion, according to representatives of leading Ukrainian defense group, Ukroboronprom. our quote, our Skiff man-portable anti-tank missile system has already been exported to 10 countries around the world. And I talked to you about how they have Arabic writing around some of them because they were going to export a load to Saudi Arabia, but then the war started and they just said, no, we're going to keep these. And to continue, and our Corsair light portable missile system has been exported to 6 countries. So right now, our company's efforts are focused on supplying our weapons to the Ukrainian military, but we're also in talks with customers from various parts of the world who are very much interested in our missiles capacities and would like to buy them when they are available. What this is saying is we've got every chance of being able to sell our Ukrainian stuff. So you got the Neptune sea missile, ground, surface to sea missiles, if you like, that can be fired off from a port or on top of a boat, even to hit a ship like the Moskva was hit by a Neptune supposedly and was sunk. So the world says, oh, they look good, we'll buy some of them. The Skiff, oh, they look good, Stugner, we'll buy some of them. But the problem is they don't want to be manufacturing them and selling them abroad because they desperately need them themselves. So what this is saying is we've got loads of interest, but we can't sell them to yet. But once this war is over, then actually our industry has a sustainable future. Anyway, I just thought that was an interesting bit of conversation to be had. There you go. This is a Su-24 Russian craft being hit. And I don't know whether, I mean, it's hard to see there whether the pilot has a chance to, there's something coming off there. I don't know whether that is the ejector seat and that could be, oh, I wonder if this was the one I showed the other day because that looks like, so this looks like the two, sorry, my head might be in the way of that. So let's just show you that again. So this is interesting. And this is, I could easily just cut this out. I could cut this video and not show it to you, right? But actually, what this is good to show is sometimes videos pop up and say, look, we shot down something else, and it's actually a video from weeks ago, and it's just being recycled to show how wonderful, in this case, the Ukrainians are. But I'm fairly sure I showed you this video and we saw 2 parachutes coming out. I'm pretty sure I've seen this video before. Now, so the talking point that comes out of this, let's use this actually. There was so Ukraine weapons tracker, who is one of my favourite Twitter handles, tracks all these weapons that are destroyed or captured, and they are often saying, these 2 guys that do it, that the Russians particularly are very good at capturing something, taking a video of it, and then saying, look, we captured this, and then they'll take a video of it from another perspective, like from behind it rather than front, and then say, look, we captured this vehicle, and then they might move it and take it again. And they said there's one vehicle that they recognized from different markers on a vehicle that the Russians had claimed to have captured 6 times. So the same vehicle was then 6 times, and then when you got Oryx like trying to count up, they have to be so careful as an open source intelligence provider, counting up the losses of both sides, that they have to be so careful that they're not counting that vehicle 6 times, inflating the losses of Ukraine, because Russia are basically saying we caught them 6 times. Anyway, just to let you know, Ukraine weapons tracker, I love this tweet, not this one, but the next one. I mean, I absolutely understand this. We'll be taking a break for a couple of days, daily reporting for 7+ months, so doing this for 7 months. I know, I've been doing this for like 2 weeks every day, and it is pretty exhausting. It's a little exhausting, but regular publications will continue after this break. We thank you for all your support so far. So it's like, fair enough, take a break, a couple of days. Thank you for all that you're doing, right? But the next one, they couldn't resist because they announced that just before the Kerch Bridge was blown up, right? And then they went, this is just delightful. The Crimea Bridge is also taking a break for a few days. That's just brilliant. And then that was our last one. Excellent. So I had to get that dig in. Just love it. Love it. But yeah, so anyway, be wary of duplication of video footage of losses and whatnot. Okay. I've seen loads of these from the Russian point of view, all these endless trains of freight of Russian armaments just going backwards and well, not backwards and forwards, just going one long line. Here is an example of a Ukrainian one, and this is kind of interesting because you haven't seen this so often from Ukraine. It just shows that the capacity that they do have to some degree. So somewhere in Ukraine, a massive trainload of equipment heads to the front line to support the efforts to liberate the sovereign lands. This video is circulating on some pro-Russian channels, so there's no harm in sharing it. And this is why it says somewhere in Ukraine, and it's okay to share it because it's already out there. The Russians have already got this, so there's often you get these accusations you shouldn't be sharing this because Russians could use it, but you'll find that you're never the first there, and the Russians will already have had access to it. But anyway, just the variety of stuff on here, all these different tanks. Are these being provided new, or are these repaired ones coming back from repair facilities? It's hard to say. Okay, and you think, oh, what's this? Just more normal train, and then oh no, more tanks, more tanks, more tanks. Lots more tanks, and this is just, I suppose, really good news. It's look at how long that train is. God, what an engine you must have to pull that weight. But it's not just tanks. You're then getting this variety. You've got four-wheel drives in there. You've got some cars, okay, some vans being used as whatnot. But it's things like this that we forget about. It's these diggers, these JCBs, or these trucks with capabilities of building trenches and doing all the generators, transport trucks. It's the whole logistics network that is so important. An army is nothing without logistics. If you don't have the capability of supplying your troops with munitions and stuff to use, then those troops are just whatever. Anyway, that's good to see that kind of stuff if you are supportive of Ukraine. And I guess what's the last thing I'm going to say? I've forgotten. Oh, yes. So, in Luhansk, occupiers say HIMARS rockets were fired at the temporary location of their Ministry of Emergency Situations near Starobilsk. No internet there, so difficult to get the truth on or photos, but on chat sites, multiple people confirm an explosion around 2 o'clock. So this was, this is today. Why this is important is because, like I've shown you before, so Starobilsk. So this is in the Luhansk region now. What we were calling the Kharkiv front line now, or Kharkiv, I now call it the kind of Kupiansk, Svatove, Kremlin front line. Okay, I have mentioned before that this Svatove was an important logistics hub because the railway went through that. But considering the Ukrainians control the railway in Kupiansk, this line from Russia down through Kupiansk and across Svatove is pretty much useless, and there's fire control at least of this P66 road highway. So they can't use Svatove effectively. So I've been arguing that Starobilsk is the next place. That's their next objective, and I'd say it's probably easier and immediately more important than these four towns, which are hugely important. But I'm an armchair general, right? So what do I know? But I would say that's your next place to strike, because then they can't take their goods down from Russia here, and they have to bring them in. They have to skirt around Ukraine. So from Belgorod, they have to bring everything right round, and in through the back of Luhansk, and then deliver it from there. And that is massively more expensive, inefficient, and time consuming. And it's just not ideal. So the fact that they are now hitting Starobilsk with HIMARS is hugely significant, because as we know, this is what they did around Svatove, and they are doing now. So they're hitting Svatove northeast, south, and west with HIMARS. They're taking out hubs, depots, junctions, all sorts of things, or whatever around here, and you know that is shaping this for a future attack. So if they're already doing that around Starobilsk, you can bet your bottom dollar that is going to be an objective going forward. So I find that fascinating. It's things like that. Just one simple tweet, if it's true, of course. If it's true, this might not be true. But if that's true, then that to me tells me, yep, they're going to hit Starobilsk. That is now going to be, that really is one of their objectives, as it should be, and as I've long said it will be. Anyway, interested to see how that develops. There you go. There's today's nuggets in the Ukraine War Update Extra. Please let me know what you think in the thread below, and if I've got anything wrong, let me know. If you agree, let me know. And thanks for all your support. Please like, subscribe, join if you can, or give thanks through the thanks, or buy me a coffee or PayPal or whatever. I really do appreciate it because I'm having to devote quite a lot of my life to this, so it's becoming a bit of a job for me, like literally. So any help is gratefully received. But if you can't, don't obviously. Just thank you for being part of this. Anyway, I will see you tomorrow. Take care and thank you for being there.